This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X-Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Our website is www.xzoneradiotv.com and on all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV. My guest this hour is Ivan Eland. He is a senior fellow and director at the Center on Peace and Liberty. Let me see. Center of Peace and Liberty at the Independent Institute. Dr. Eland is a graduate of Iowa State University and received an MBA in Applied Economics and a PhD in Public Policy from George Washington University. He's been the director of the Defense Policy Studies at the Cato Institute, and he spent 15 years working for Congress on national security issues, including stints as an investigator for the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the principal defense analyst at the Congressional Budget Office. Joining me now is Ivan Eland. And Ivan, welcome to the X-Zone. Great having you with us.
Thanks for having me on.
What is going on in the world today? It seems that terrorism is not a thing of the past. Look what's happening in Nigeria. 200 girls kidnapped. Nobody can find them. In your opinion, and I know you've studied this, you wrote an excellent article entitled Imperialism and Nigerian Schoolgirls. I was wondering if you could give us your opinion of what is behind the Boko Haram and what we can expect from not only them but other extremist groups in the future.
Well, I think this meshes nicely with President Obama's speech on terrorism that he just gave. And I think this is a classic case of one of these Islamist groups that are dispersed now around the world. Mm-hmm. Some of them are affiliated with Al-Qaeda, some of them aren't. This one is totally Nigerian. It has concerns only about Nigeria. It's probably one of the more vicious groups in the world, actually, but it really doesn't affect U.S. security. And I think the administration's approach to this, and certainly the administration is not unusual about this. George W. Bush conducted himself in the same manner. We take on everyone else's problems. Now, there's no doubt about the fact that kidnapping these almost 300 schoolgirls is a heinous thing. These are innocent people, right? But this group has done worse, actually, and nobody really paid attention to it until the schoolgirls became the cause célèbre. And, of course, they haven't been killed that we know of. They've been kidnapped, and they're being held. And there has been some negotiations to get them out. So the group apparently is not totally unreasonable, but certainly it's radical, and it's a heinous act that they did this, but they have slaughtered entire villages. They have shot and burned to death 59 schoolboys prior to this kidnapping the schoolgirls. So, but this didn't appear on the radar screen until domestic pressure groups in the West started saying we need something done about this. And of course, Western governments, France, Britain, U.S., and also Israel have responded. The problem is their response has probably been counterproductive because the Nigerian government is reluctant to get public assistance from the West simply because it feels, and probably rightly so, that it will elevate the status of the group and the group will get more followers within Nigeria and become an even bigger problem than it is. And of course, as I say, this type of terrorism, most of these groups now are local, and the United States should be very careful in what it does because we've made enemies of the Pakistani Taliban. In fact, we created the Pakistani Taliban. They didn't exist before we did a nation-building war in Afghanistan. And then also, when I say we, I mean the U.S. and NATO allies in Afghanistan. And then we also Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula, which may be the most dangerous group. It now attacks U.S. targets, but of course it didn't before the United States went in and started helping the government of Yemen during the George Bush administration, some years ago. And so we risk turning these local groups into people who are attacking the United States and the West simply because we have a high visibility. Now, high visibility assistance to governments or even taking direct military action in the case of drones in Yemen, Somalia, Pakistan. But the real crux of this is if you're going to do this and help other countries out, you should do it on the, so it's a quiet type of help rather than public help. But the problem is there's a problem that politicians in the West have. They have to pretend to be doing something or seen as doing something. And of course, that negates a surreptitious help to these countries because at home, they've got to prove that they're doing something about the problem, even if it's not really a U.S. security issue.
Ivan, you and I have to take a 2-minute commercial break. Please stand by. X-Zone Nation. Ivan Eland is our special guest, and we'll be back on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break. Don't go away. Modern Esoteric, Beyond Our Senses by Brad Olson, consummates the lifeology story about where humanity originates. It is the lost continents, the primitive wisdom, the mythos of creation, and the rethinking of ancient history as we are taught in academia. There is much more to the story than what we have been told. As this is the first book in the Esoteric series, Modern Esoteric starts at the beginning of time and accelerates up to this modern age. Future Esoteric is book 2 in the series and takes a forward-looking position ahead of today with an open and honest examination of the ET issue and various unexplained phenomena. To discover the writings of author Brad Olson, visit www.bradolson.com. That's www.bradolson.com. Named one of the world's greatest psychics, Elizabeth Joyce is now giving readings worldwide via Skype. Elizabeth Joyce is recognized for her clairvoyant ability to help find missing persons, her analysis of dreams, past life regression work, mediumship, and her accurate predictions. Elizabeth has been a frequent guest on the X-Zone radio show with yours truly, Rob McConnell, now for several years. For an appointment with Elizabeth Joyce, call 201-934-8986 or Skype at elizabeth.joyce. And for more information, you can always visit Elizabeth Joyce online at www.new-visions.com.
Do you have a dis-ease that you would like to alleviate through a natural means? Have you been contacted by angels, ghosts, or even extraterrestrials and want to validate these experiences? Or would you simply like to speak with someone who can help you find your life's purpose? I'm Dr. Joseph Mara, and I'm offering my services free of charge for first-time clients contacting me during the month of April. These free consultations include angel card readings, guided meditations, life coaching, and energy healing. If you have always wanted to explore these types of experiences but were skeptical or simply could not afford them, then take advantage of this free special offer. Contact me through my website, aguidinglight, spelled lite.com, to schedule your consultation today. Until then, I offer you love, light, and laughter.
Welcome back, everyone. Our guest this hour is Ivan Eland. He is the Senior Fellow and Director at the Center on Peace and Liberty. The website is www.independent.org. Eland, do you think that the advent of social media has certainly played a big part of this Nigerian schoolgirl fiasco?
Well, I think social media probably plays a part in any crisis now or would-be crisis anywhere overseas. So I think, yes, it has. It has fueled the domestic pressure groups in the Western countries have fueled it both through, if you want to call it, old media and new media.
Right.
And therefore, I think the politicians are responding by very public help to the Nigerian government.
What is the opinion of the American public when it comes to spending this money and this time in yet another area of the world with so many resources being so spread out so thinly around the world, and now with the crisis with the Veterans Administration, it seems that there's being a lot put on the plate of the American public who ultimately end up paying the bill?
Well, I think, taken all together, the American public is sick of warfare.
Sure.
And they're also disgusted that, we can spend all this money overseas on this and that, but then when it comes to our veterans, taking care of them, the people that have gone over and, sacrificed limbs or, other things like post-traumatic stress syndrome and that sort of thing, we're falling down and taking care of them here in the United States at the veterans hospitals.
When it comes to Boko Haram, do you see that this type of publicity that is giving this terrorist organization is going to prompt other cells to pick up the pace and to make more daring attacks because they know that they're going to get the publicity, they're going to get the attention that the Boko Haram are getting?
Yeah, I think it's a bad model to send out. First of all, terrorists want publicity, and the reason that they want publicity is because they can get more funding and recruit more fighters. And putting them on the U.S. terrorism list when they don't attack the U.S., there are many groups on the U.S. terrorism list that don't attack the U.S., raises their status. Also, when the president comes out and very publicly said, hey, we really want to help the Nigerian government, but the Nigerian government is reluctant and they're incompetent and all this kind of stuff. It's sort of an imperialist attitude that, well, you need to do what we want you to do because we have to satisfy our domestic, I should say certain segments of our domestic opinion here, because I think most people, as I just mentioned, are sick of war, but there are groups, for every issue, there are groups that pressure for intervention, and the U.S. is accustomed to this sorts of intervention, so the politicians succumb to the pressure of several groups, and many people are starting to get fed up with this. And I think that certainly everybody wants those schoolgirls to get out, but the question is, perhaps if we are going to aid the Nigerian government, we need to do so, more secretly rather than such a public show of. And of course, we're criticizing our government officials here in the United States are criticizing the Nigerian government for being incompetent, for being slow to accept the help and all that kind of stuff. But of course, the Nigerian government may be right because they know the situation. The problem with all these countries, Afghanistan, Iraq, Nigeria, Egypt, whatever country we're talking about, our politicians and bureaucrats only know so much about the cultures of these countries. And we go crusading in there for this cause or that cause, and we usually end up screwing it up because the local government knows that if they publicly are seen as going back to the colonial oppressors such as Britain and Nigeria, I mean, Boko Haram will get even more followers, and will have its status elevated. And I think I think the Nigerian government has some very real problems. Plus, the Nigerian government is the one that's negotiating with this group now to perhaps get the schoolgoers out. The president is denying it, the president of Nigeria, but there have been negotiations with the group.
Tell me, in your opinion, is it possible that the democracy that we share here in North America will not work in other parts of the world?
Oh, I think that's very, very true. You know, some people, democracy usually has to have a certain level of economic
stability and strength.
Stability and the middle class to promote it, because in countries with no middle class, it's difficult to get a sustained democracy.
Right.
And I think countries really, democracy has to bubble up from the bottom, not be imposed like we tried to in Iraq and Afghanistan from the top down using military force. It just doesn't work because people want to accept democracy. Democracy is a great thing, but they have to be ready for it, number one. And number two, they like it to be their idea rather than the use of force. The use of force, anything brought with the use of force, whether it's giving candy to kids or whatever else, is resented by local people because it's not them that's doing it.
I look at
and I think if a foreign power came to Canada or the U.S. and did some of the things that the United States has done overseas, we wouldn't like it here if it were done to us like that.
I agree with you 100%. I remember doing stories a couple of years ago about what was going on in Egypt and how the people in Egypt didn't want martial law. They didn't want the military involved. They fought tooth and nail to get democracy. And now they're fighting tooth and nail to get democracy out and the military back in.
Right, exactly. So these countries will go from one strong leader to the next. It's just a different, sign on the door. But the problem is, I think first of all, I don't think, even if we could institute democracy from the top down, if we did it right, I don't think we know enough about the culture in many of these countries to do that. And also, democracy in the Islamic world right now means like radical Islamists may do fairly well in the elections, like happened in Egypt with the Muslim Brotherhood.
Yeah. I agree with you that democracy is wonderful, but it has to be wanted before it can be successful. And I think there are many places around the world where the West is trying to force democracy into the public and to the citizens as well as to the governments. And just like anything else, if you force a person to do something that they don't want to do, you're going to get resistance. And I think that this is what we're seeing in a lot of these countries and a lot of these conflicts that are going on in the world today.
Right, I think that's right. And a lot of the blowback terrorism that we get is as a result of interfering in Islamic countries, because even moderate people of moderate Islamic tendencies, they realize that the faith requires them to repel non-Muslim forces from Muslim lands. Well, of course, the United States went into Saudi Arabia, and that's what triggered bin Laden to start attacking the United States. That's just one big example of why you don't want to do these things.
A couple of months ago, President Obama drew a red line in Syria. And when that red line was crossed, another red line. Do you think that the president's indecisiveness in Syria had anything to do with what President Putin did in Ukraine?
Well, probably not, because the Putin knows that we're not going to fight a nuclear war, which is the ultimate possibility whenever Russia and the United States get into it. Because Russia, even after the Cold War is long over with, it's the only country with thousands of warheads to match the U.S. thousands of warheads. So anytime you get into a dust-up with Russia, that's always looming in the background, even if nobody's blatantly threatened each other with the nuclear weapons. But I think that we overstate what we do in one place is going to affect another place. And frankly, I don't think Obama should have made a red line,
Yeah.
because chemical weapons, frankly, don't kill that many people. It's about 1% in the Syrian war, and that's traditionally, even during World War I, where they were used on a mass scale, about only 1% of the casualties were caused by chemical weapons. Now, it's not to say that dying by chemicals is a good thing,
Right.
but it's not dying of an explosion or starvation, as is happening in Syria. That's not fun either. So I think the chemical weapons thing was overblown, and I'm glad to see that they eventually worked that out. And basically, Russia bailed the U.S. out, and of course, we've lost track of that in this whole Crimea thing.
Exonation, Ivan Eland is our special guest this hour. He's the Senior Fellow and Director of the Center on Peace and Liberty. One part of the world that really bothers me is the tension between Pakistan and India. Here we have two countries that both have nuclear capability, and it seems at times that that one is just waiting for the other one to scratch them the wrong way.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And Pakistan is the most dangerous country in the world. Forget about Afghanistan, Iraq, Egypt, wherever. Pakistan, and we destabilized Pakistan. The NATO has, U.S.-led NATO, by conducting a nation-building war in Afghanistan. As I mentioned earlier in the program, the Pakistani Taliban never existed before that. The Afghan Taliban did, but not the Pakistani Taliban. And U.S. drone strikes have destabilized that country. And the reason Pakistan is so dangerous is because it has nuclear weapons, and that instability in a nuclear weapon state can either probably less likely that the Islamists would actually get their hands on nuclear weapons unless the whole Pakistani government imploded. But what may happen is Pakistan is under this internal problem. It may lash out externally, and who are they going to lash out externally? Their arch rival and neighbor, India, which also has nuclear weapons. Now, I'm happy to see that the new prime minister, who's regarded as a Hindu nationalist, invited various people to his inaugural ceremony. He was just elected, and one of those was Pakistani leader, and so they were talking, and that's a good thing in the case of India and Pakistan.
Ivan, please stand by. You and I have to take a commercial break with the news at the bottom of the hour. Exonation, our very special guest this hour is Dr. Ivan Eland. He is the Senior Fellow and Director at the Center on Peace and Liberty, and that's at the Independent Institute. Their website is www.independent.org, and we'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as we continue here in the X Zone from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away. Are you considering calling a psychic to read your situation? Then consider David Champion, a psychic medium for more than 20 years with thousands of readings under his belt. David Champion will make you feel comfortable. He has proven to be honest and accurate. He's a straight shooter. There's no guesswork. What he sees is what you get. While he is a medium, most of the calls focus on relationships, not only love, but work, school, neighbors, and more. Need help with finding a job and preparing for the interview? Are you dealing with people who are obstacles in your path? For more information, go to davidchampion.com, $1.50 per minute paid by credit card with a minimum of 30 minutes. For your reading with David Champion, call 1-877-702-8598. That's 1-877-702-8598. Now you can dial in to listen to the X-Zone radio show from anywhere in the world with Rob McConnell 24/7, 365 by dialing 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080. If you have a mobile phone or landline, the X-Zone radio show with Rob McConnell is now at your beck and call at 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080, 24/7, 365. Now you can dial in to listen to the X-Zone radio show from anywhere in the world with Rob McConnell 24/7, 365 by dialing 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080. If you have a mobile phone or landline, the X-Zone radio show with Rob McConnell is now at your beck and call at 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080, 24/7, 365.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My guest this hour is Senior Fellow and Director of the Center on Peace and Liberty. It's part of the Independent Institute. Our guest is Dr. Ivan Eland. He is the Senior Fellow and Director. And first of all, Ivan, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's great having you here. During the promo that they ran on the networks that we're on the Wiki broadcast. What was your opinion of WikiLeaks, and did they crucially stick a spokes into the national security of the U.S.?
Well, I think these they probably did. Assange, Julian Assange, who's the head of WikiLeaks, and he's also cooperating with Edward Snowden. They probably did, but because they oppose U.S. policy. But that is to say, should they be prosecuted and harassed like they are, like Assange is holed up in the embassy because the U.S. is after him, and he can make the legitimate claim that he's being harassed for his actions. Mm-hmm. They are, of course, charging with some unrelated charge, but when the U.S. goes after you, they're pretty ruthless about it. And I think he probably did, but he's a media outlet, and therefore I think my own view is there's certain secrets that governments have to keep, but if you can't keep your own secrets, you can't blame the press. And there's been an increasingly, Obama was supposed to be pro-civil liberties, but he's gone after some of these reporters, for U.S. reporters mm-hmm. and people like Julian Assange of WikiLeaks, because they published stuff that his own government leaked out. So I think certainly if there's a bureaucrat who's taken an oath to protect this information, mm-hmm. and he or she leaks it, sure, prosecute them, because they're not supposed to be doing that. They're making their money with the government, et cetera, right?
Well, isn't that what Edward Snowden did? Here we've got a guy who was who was paid by the U.S. government, whether he was working for a contractor or not, and he decides to take all this information, go over to China, go over to Russia, and like this guy, in my opinion, should be treated as a traitor.
Well, I think to some extent he should be prosecuted because he did violate his oath. Mm-hmm. However, there's some mitigating circumstances in this, and the fact that the National Security Agency was spying on its own citizens, essentially, in the United States, which in a republic, it's very important not to do that. You can have all the intelligence in the world against foreign countries, but you shouldn't be if you're in a republic, a legitimate republic, you shouldn't be spying on your own citizens.
Why not?
And he pointed that out.
But why not?
But
why not?
Well,
Why
I
not?
think it's approaching a police state when you do that, and I think it's a slippery slope when you start spying on your own citizens. And we have very strict laws in the United States, and our Constitution in the United States, the Fourth Amendment, is supposed to prevent that. And so Edward Snowden is pointing out a clear violation of the text of the Constitution. And with the defense as well, the executive branch, the Congress, and the courts have all blessed this. And I say, well, I don't care, because when you read the U.S. Constitution, it's still unconstitutional. And that's a very important, when there's a violation of the Constitution of this magnitude, I would prosecute him, but I would prosecute him, just slap his hand or give him a reduced charge. And I think that's what this interview with Brian Williams of NBC was designed to set up, and I think that's what actually may happen eventually.
But what does this say about the people that are within the United States who are getting off from being spied by the National Security Agency? And my look is, hey, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to fear. You want to listen to my phone calls? Go right ahead. You want to see what my mail is? Go right ahead. It doesn't bother me because I have nothing to hide.
Well, it might bother you, though, if they got the wrong guy or they thought you were doing something that you weren't. The government makes, at least in the U.S., I don't know about the Canadian government, but I'm assuming the Canadian government also makes mistakes on occasion.
Oh, sure they do. Sure they do.
And there was a case of that Syrian guy who the U.S. apprehended, and Canada was involved in that, and they tortured him, and it turned out he didn't do anything. And we've had cases, our anthrax attacks after the 9/11, they got the wrong guy for that, and then the second guy that there was a suspect, committed suicide, and some scientists said he wasn't even the right guy. So we're not even completely sure if we got the right guy in that. The Olympic bombing of a few years ago in Atlanta, they got the wrong guy for that, and they ruined his life. And so the governments make mistakes all the time, and that's why you're not really sticking up for the rights of the criminal. When you're sticking up for the rights of the criminal, you're really sticking up for the rights of everybody who could be falsely accused. And that's what the United States system, at least, and I think the Canadian system, is designed to protect innocent people. And that's why this is so important.
I understand the need to protect the innocent. I really do. I am dead against wrongful prosecution. However, I would much rather have the intelligence agencies with their eyes not only on foreign enemies, but also on domestic enemies. Because as we saw with the Boston bombing, they were domestic enemies who committed a terrorist attack. So where do you draw the line between protecting the citizens and, getting them all up in arms about their privacy?
Well, I think these were the Boston bombing was Americans, but they had foreign connections, and I have no problem with the FBI using their investigative powers in this thing. But what we're talking about, and I don't even have any problem with the spy agencies or the FBI or whatever spying on Americans if they get a warrant. The real problem is warrantless wiretapping. And the reason that you need a warrant in the United States, at least, is because we have a separation of powers, and the courts act as a check on an executive branch. And of course, if you're in the FBI or the NSA, you want to use every technique you can. And the courts have to say, well, listen, you need a warrant to do that. And
but the bad guys don't get warrants. The criminals don't go to the court and say, I want a warrant to commit a criminal act. Plus, we're talking about a constitution where the ability of terrorism and the terrorists to commit the acts that they're doing now with the modern day technology didn't exist. So there has to be, in my opinion, There has to be, in my opinion,
I think
a change. And once again, if law enforcement needs to do something that has been sanctioned by a higher branch of government without getting a warrant, then so be it.
No, I disagree with that. I think you need a judicial warrant just as a check. This really doesn't slow down the process, because if there's an emergency here in the U.S., they have a waiver where they don't have to get the warrant, and they can get it retroactively. And that the system that they had before they started violating, and the Bush administration clearly violated the Constitution and the law by not getting these warrants. The current system worked just fine. They've never pointed to an incident where they didn't have the speed, because they do have that capability to waive the warrant if it's really a national emergency, and then they go back and get it late, after the fact. And also, I think we can tend to overstate the threat of terrorism. Your chances, if you're an American, and it's probably even less for Canadian citizens, your chances of ever being killed by an international terrorist are 1 in 80,000, which is about the same as being struck by an asteroid. And you have a better chance of being struck by lightning than ever being killed by a terrorist. So terrorism is still a rare thing. And also, we stir up a lot of these groups overseas, and that's why they do attack the United States. And I think if we did less of that, then there wouldn't be a trade-off between civil liberties and security, because we wouldn't have to face that. But North America, before 9/11, and it's continued after 9/11, is probably the safest continent in the world as far as terrorism. And the reason for that is terrorism are just like other military forces. They have difficulty operating when their logistics lines are very long, and there's big oceans on either side of Canada and the United States, which keep us safer than other places on terrorism. In the State Department's terrorism reports, there was only like 0 or 1 incident for most of the years leading up to 9/11, and I think we're still very low on terrorism on a normal basis.
Well, could the reason for that be that the action that the security and intelligence agencies have taken since 9/11?
Well, as I say, I suppose you could attribute to that, but we didn't have much terrorism before 9/11. So that sort of destroys that argument. If you didn't have much before, 9/11 was a sort of a one-off event. That's been the largest terrorist attack that a group has committed. Now, of course, nations have committed terrorism on a far grander scale than groups have. But as far as groups, that's a big outlier if you were to do a statistical analysis. And that's not saying it couldn't happen again, but certainly the security measures have probably provided some measure of making it less likely to happen. So one of the best things they did was probably harden the cockpit doors in aircraft so that you may be able to hijack an aircraft, although that would be less chance of that too. But certainly it's a big block on hijacking a plane and running it into a building, which is really what you don't want it to have happen. I mean, you can still blow up a plane, but then you just blow up the people on the plane, and that's bad enough. But it's not as bad as killing thousands in a skyscraper.
Well, I'm sure that the families of the aircraft that went down in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, would strongly disagree with you on that, because whether it's 3,000 some odd like it was in New York City, or those passengers and crew aboard the airliner that those people fought so brilliantly to save others by having that plane go down, I'm sure those families are saying, well, geez, one life lost to terrorism is too many.
Well, I understand that, and I'm not saying that any terror, no matter who gets killed by a terrorist, I'm not minimizing that. But what I am saying is that, and that's an example of probably the biggest thing that happened after 9/11. On 9/12, we were a lot safer if the government hadn't done anything, and it's because the paradigm shifted right in the middle of that terrorism attack. Previously, air crews and passengers were really instructed to play along with the terrorists. You might get hijacked to Cuba. They might shoot one person to show they're tough and so that the other passengers don't rebel. But most of the people will probably walk away from this alive but scared, right? Well, that paradigm changed because these these were being used as a suicide weapon, and you saw that fourth plane, it seems as if what happened is, you're exactly right, the people did courageously rebel, and the reason that they did was because they realized that they were all going to die too, and they were going to take a lot more people with them.
Sure.
And so, of course, now, and you've seen this paradigm change with the underwear bomber,
Yep.
or the guy who's trying to light his shoes on fire. Air crews and passengers, they don't put up with anything anymore. People will take, the other passengers will tackle the guy and put him under the table. So I think that's a big improvement on security, and that's not even a governmental thing, really.
You know what I couldn't understand that I thought was totally stupid? One of the biggest stupid blunders that they had ever done knowingly or that just never crossed anybody's mind was when they decided in their infinite wisdom to decrease the number of air marshals on flights. What do? They tell the media. What does the media do? Tells everybody. So here you've got a situation that, in my opinion, is just beckoning trouble to come on board again.
Well, air marshals are one thing that they can do. I think air travel is pretty safe with the cockpit doors and the surly passengers nowadays. But they probably shouldn't have told people they're reducing the air marshals because So I mean, certainly the air marshals help out as well, but I'm not sure all this equipment at the airport that annoys everybody is really helping out that much. But people seem to like it, and if they want to like it, that, like I said, the terrorism threat is you have to keep it in perspective, and we can't just run around and destroy the country's constitutions and stuff by making them a quasi police state or whatever.
Exactly.
But because I think you have to put the threat in perspective. Certainly terrorism is bad, but not that many people get killed by terrorism, and that the people that do get killed, it's really bad, it's really awful. But I think from a policy standpoint, if you pull yourself away from, if you've lost a relative, then you're probably not going to be very rational about it. But if policymakers have to pull themselves away, and you really have to put the threat in perspective, and I think you also think that the United States is never very good at analyzing why things happen, like why Pearl Harbor happened. If you ask the average American what led up to Pearl Harbor,
I've got to take my final break here. Please stand by. Please stand by, Ivan. We'll be back in a couple of minutes. Exonation, Ivan Eland is my guest. We'll be back. Don't go away. With each new extreme weather event or terrorist act, it becomes increasingly obvious that we live in uncertain and challenging times. We all buy car insurance. Why not collapse and catastrophe insurance? Matthew Stein, an MIT-trained engineer and green builder, has written 2 outstanding books to help people prepare, plan for, and deal with everything from minor situations lasting a few days to full-on collapse. Matt's first book, When Technology Fails, is a manual for self-reliance, sustainable living, and surviving the long emergency. This massive book covers the gamut from first aid and emergency preparedness to alternative healing, renewable energy, primitive living skills, and 18th century technologies that could be critical to your comfort and survival in a long-lasting crisis. Matt's second book, When Disaster Strikes, is a comprehensive emergency preparedness handbook and survival guide. When Disaster Strikes is an essential item for every family's go bag. Both books are available at all usual sources. There's a wealth of totally free information posted at whentechfails.com, and author-signed copies may be purchased at mattstein.com. That's www.whentechfails.com and www.matstein.com. Rob McConnell here, presenting an overview for Nicholas Paul Jennings, author of a fascinating book, Amen. It presents facts revealed by Egyptologists, facts that enable us to understand why Amen is the beginning of creation of God. It provides recommendations for religious leaders of the major religions to unify their beliefs and teach the Word of God. Love one another. Amen informs people how mankind conceived God. It was the Egyptians that developed the concepts of a soul, a hereafter, and Son of God. And finally, after the worship of many gods, they conceived the belief in one universal God, the maker of all there is. For more information, visit www.futureofgodamen.com. That's www.futureofgodamen.com. Exonation, Dr. Ivan Eland is our special guest this hour. He is the Senior Fellow and Director at the Center on Peace and Liberty, which is at the Independent Institute. His website is www.independent.org. And Leland, you and I were talking during the commercial break that you've got a new book coming out.
Yeah, I've written a book on the presidents called Recarving Rushmore, ranking the presidents on peace, prosperity, and liberty. And this is a revised edition, which includes the Obama years that have already passed. And so this really evaluates all the U.S. presidents as the country's founders would have rated them had they been around to do so. And so it's kind of a unique perspective on the presidents. It evaluates them on the basis of whether they kept the peace, not whether they went to war, whether they were kept the free market and other things that lead to prosperity, and whether they stuck up for civil liberties that are in the U.S. Constitution.
We've got about 3 minutes left, Leland. I'd like to ask you a very simple question. Do you think that the Benghazi fiasco will affect anything? Will affect the chances of former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton from either making the run or becoming the First Lady in the White House?
No, I don't. I think the Republicans are using it for that because the incident was not that severe. Yes, the Obama administration probably was trying to downplay the organized terrorist element of the attack, but compared to what some of the other presidents have done, LBJ and getting us in Vietnam, George W. Bush, and getting us Iraq, this is pretty minor in comparison. But I think the Republicans are staying on it because Hillary will probably be the Democratic nominee, and the Democrats have an excellent chance to win the next election simply because the demographics are going to go there. Well, I don't mean the one coming up this year because I think the Republicans probably could do well locally in the Congress. The next presidential election in 2016, I think the Democrats are better set up to win it. So I think it's a minor issue as far as the election goes. I think a bigger issue will be the veterans, not taking care of the veterans. That will be the bigger issue.
If Secretary of State Clinton does get into the White House as president, this will be the first time in history. Not only will there be a lady president, but it'll be the first time in history where the first female president in power is married to and living with a former president. Is that going to be pro or con?
Well, I don't like hereditary succession. I don't like familial succession either. And I don't like it in the Bush family and the Clinton family. And I think that's not very good for a republic to have these things that are passed down from generation to generation. And the other thing I worried about Hillary is that certainly a woman is capable of being president, but a Republican woman would have less of a problem being more moderate overseas. She's a hawk, and the reason is she's a woman and she's a Democrat, and I think she's trying to compensate for both of those she doesn't want to be seen as weak. Now, if you're a Republican woman candidate, they wouldn't have as much of a problem because they're not a Democrat. The Democrats have a reputation of being weak, which I think is unfounded actually, but nonetheless they have that reputation. So I'm a little bit concerned with their hawkishness, but usually people moderate when they get in office.
Ivan, I want to thank you so much for joining us. It's been a great pleasure. You have an open invitation here anytime, my friend, and I'd love to have you back on to discuss your book and talk to you about the various presidents.
Thank you.
All right, take care, Ivan. Ivan Eland has been our guest this hour, www.independent.org. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news as the X Zone continues, right here from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. My name is Rob McConnell. Don't go away.